Hello, everybody, and welcome back to UXchange, the podcast where I exchange my user experiences to change them, and yours for the better. I'm Jeremy, a mentor and senior user researcher with over 8 years of experience and a background in neuroscience. Throughout my career, I've had the privilege of engaging with hundreds of users around the world, spanning across Europe, the USA, Africa, and India. This has allowed me to deliver actionable insights that have improved user experiences with nutrition, automotive, delivery, and e-commerce sectors. I've created this podcast with the aim of providing my mentorship and educational content, offering actionable tips, knowledge, and guidance in the realm of research, specifically focusing on UX research to anyone having an interest in this area. And I hope that you will find this episode insightful.
One, two, three, four.
Let's jump right in. Today, I'll cover the third episode about scoping a UX research project. So this episode is the last one of a 3-series episodes on the topic. The first one being about why you should scope a UX research project, and the second one being when and how you should scope your UX research project. So if you haven't done it yet, I highly encourage you to listen to these first 2 episodes before listening to this one. At least it will provide you context and as well providing you some guidance regarding when and how you should scope your UX research projects. Okay, so before giving you an overview of the content of this episode, first of all, some disclaimers. Here I will provide my actual framework that I use on a project-by-project basis in order for me to scope them. What do I mean by scope? Scoping, in my opinion, is preparing, is fine-tuning, is grooming a request before actually moving forward. So it's not yet the step of the research plan. By scoping here, I mean asking myself some important questions that will allow me to determine, should I move forward with this project, first of all? Then, if I should move forward, what is the intensity of my efforts I should provide on this project? And the last questions being the actual questions that in general you ask yourself to craft a research plan. So, as part of a disclaimer, the questions that I provide, the guidance that I provide in this scoping framework is intended to be used as such, only as a guidance. It's not an exhaustive guide. The intention is not for you to feel overwhelmed, and also if you intend to use them to ask them directly to your stakeholders, the goal is also not to overwhelm them. As I was saying in the previous episode regarding when and how you should do it, consider that some of the questions you might already have the answers yourself, or you can also access the answers yourself. So no need to send a whole document with all the questions to your stakeholders, because usually that will not be really much appreciated, and also it's possible that you will not have answers to all the questions, and understandably so. And so these questions, this guide, I crafted it over 8 years of experience in the process of scoping my UX research projects. So as I was saying, nothing is intended to be used completely. It's only here as a guidance. How can it guide you? Well, first of all, imagine you're starting a UX research project and you do not know what you should think about in order for you to determine how to tackle it. Well, this can be the first use case. You can use this as a template, as a framework, so that you reduce the cognitive load on yourself and you reduce all of the doubts you might have. It can also help you to make tangible the discussions between you and your manager and you and your stakeholders. To make it clear, for instance, that you have no information about the project before starting, or that some information is conflictual. So it can also help you to make it more tangible. That's also a second use case. And I cannot think right now of others, but for me, these two use cases make it so that it's really well appreciated to have a framework in this case. I mean, if I had it back then, 8 years ago when I started, I would have really much appreciated it. So I hope it helps. Okay, and then for whom this framework could be, who could it help? So whether you're a junior UX researcher or a senior UX researcher, it can help at any level. The problem, let's say, with junior UX researchers, I mean, the problem with your situation, not you, your situation, is that in general, you're not given the possibility to actually prioritize the UX research projects. It's not on you, and it's totally understandable because you're at a stage of your career in which you should actually work on improving your craft, improving your skills. So it would be not reasonable to ask you to prioritize UX research projects. You should actually build your skills in UX research. So that could be a situation in which this framework, you could think that it would not be as useful for you. Or you can be in another situation, which is you could actually do it, but you have no say in that because the projects are prioritized between the UX research manager and product managers alongside with business and so on. And so you would have no say in that, even if you had the time and the skills to prioritize your UX research projects. Well, no worries if these two situations are yours. In any case, this framework could still be useful for you for the reasons that I stated before. The first one being that you can align with your stakeholders, like putting everything on paper so that everything is clear. Even if you're not forced to use it as a scoping framework, but more as a guidance. And also for you, in order for you to have a roadmap to scope the project before starting. So at least it could be used this way. Okay, now on to the overview of this episode. So this episode will be fairly simple because we will go over the actual framework divided into steps. The first step being the questions that you can ask to actually see if the project passes the first filter, because this framework is kind of a 3-step filter regarding UX research projects. The first set of questions are actually a filter which is the most harsh, if I might say. Why is it harsh? It's because if the UX research project request doesn't successfully answers, let's say, doesn't successfully answer the first set of questions, you can say that you won't run the UX research project. So it's a first set of questions to filter out the projects you should not run. So it's just let's say a go, no go, a yes or no, should I run this research project or not? This is the first set of questions. Then, if you pass this first filter, you will move on to a second filter, which is not as harsh as the first one because you will still run the UX research project because you passed the first one. But this second set of questions will help you determine how much effort you should actually allocate to your UX research project. And I still consider this as a filter because sometimes you have your stakeholders, including maybe your UX research manager, suggesting you some approach to run the UX research project. Well, if you use this framework, sometimes it can help you to see that the actual approach that has been suggested to you is not the right one. Because, I don't know, you have already a lot of info from past UX research projects, so maybe there is no need to run a heavy research project. That can be one scenario. So that's the second set of questions, which are more geared towards how much effort should you allocate to your UX research project. And the last set of questions is not a filter per se, let's say a mini filter. It's like some tweaking into your UX research project, into your planning, such as, I don't know, number of participants, number of sessions, methodology, whatever. Even though these are also kind of the answers you can have from the previous one, okay? But there is a bit of tweaking here, and it's more kind of the research plan. So it can be still a filter because it can determine how you run your research project. But in my opinion, the first two are the most drastic ones, and the last one is more like to set up the research in itself. Okay, so we will go over we'll go over each section, and I will develop what is the advantage of each research section, and also the content in terms of questions. And then at the end of the show, in the show notes, you will of course have the link to this actual research scoping framework. And I like to think about this framework as an actual screener. So I like to think about all the UX research projects that come to you as actual participants. Imagine participants struggling to participate to UX research study because they know that they will be compensated. Well, imagine instead of participants, you have UX research projects. So they fight to come to you. And in general, this is oftentimes the case. We have a lot of research projects to not choose from. That would be a luxury, but to prioritize in between them. And so imagine that this scoping is kind of a screener. The same way you send a screener to your participants to determine, okay, not at ease with technology, out. Or, I don't know, any other criteria, okay? Not choosing a smartphone, out. That's the only thing I can think about right now. But you get the idea. This scoping is kind of a screener for your UX research projects. Okay, so first set of questions. Why should you actually have a filter, a way to filter your actual UX research projects? Well, as I said previously in the first and second episode, time is of the essence. As in any other knowledge work, time is of the essence. And so as any other member of a product team, we constantly fight against our biggest enemy of all time, which is time. And so because of that, we need to prioritize. We can, in general, we cannot do all the UX research projects that we are asked. Okay, so we need to prioritize. And so this need to prioritize is important because it will help you if you actually prioritize correctly to ensure that you answer the most pressuring needs of the users that align with the business goal of the company in an effective, efficient, and viable fashion. And so by actually filtering out the unrelevant projects, you have more time to dedicate to the more relevant ones. And by relevant here, I mean the projects that align the business, the projects that answer more the user's needs, that are more in line with users' needs, whatever, or that fit with the roadmap, whatever, of course. So these are the kind of questions you can ask yourself in order to prioritize and to maximize the impact and the value. And again, the impact is something I talked about in the first episode. So if you haven't done so, go back, listen to it. And so this first set of questions is intended to help you determine if there is a place for UX research. First of all, of course, if the insights will be used, if UX research is the best source for your insights, and if the efforts required can be like, imagine you find you uncover some insights and you give some recommendations. Can the team apply them, basically? So here are some examples of questions. So first of all, of course, and this is not actually the filter, but it helps you to contextualize. So the goals. What are the project goals? What are the research goals? And then you can ask this set of questions to your stakeholders. Why is this project important? So this is a really broad question, but if your stakeholder is not able to answer you in a compelling manner, this is, in my opinion, this is a red flag. Then you can ask yourself, is research actually really needed? So for instance, you can ask your stakeholder, is user research the best source for insights? Sometimes stakeholders come to you with questions that are most answered by analytics or behavioral analytics. So, or maybe a secondary research. So it's still research, but it's not UX research. It's not you will not interact with actual users. So it can help you choose at this step. Also, you can ask, what is the risk of actually launching the product or the feature without research? If there is absolutely no risk to launch a feature without research, can happen. Well, why run research? You may have other research projects waiting, for which if you launch something without research, it will be dramatic. So it helps you think about this. We can also ask, what do we already know? And what stage we are in the product development process. Okay, and so what stage are we in the product development process? And then I wrote down another question, which is the research capacity. Can the team support the request? And if we create the research and if we conduct the research and create a list of recommendations, can someone actually make them a reality? How are we going to use the research insights? So it has been at least 4 questions here, but to me, it's kind of a package. So let me tell you a story that happened to me quite frequently in the past. So I have these amazing stakeholders coming to me and saying, can you run this research, please? We're going to launch some tests soon, and we want to understand what's going to happen if something goes wrong. Yes, okay, I can probably run research. Let me see. What tests are you about to launch? Oh, we're going to launch an A/B test. Okay. You're going to launch an A/B test. So I'm going to run research and uncover some insights rooted in qualitative analysis. Tell me if before your A/B test, you will be able to iterate on the design. Oh, no, but it will actually complement our understanding of A/B tests. Okay. Now tell me, because I know how A/B test works. If you don't, it's actually pretty simple. You present 2 variations of a live website or application to your customers. So there is a tiny change, one factor actually that changes. And so one population of participants see one thing and the other population of participants see another thing. And except if they talk if they talk one to another, the first population doesn't know about the feature that the second population is seeing. Okay, and then you will measure the actual effectiveness of this factor, of this feature change, on some UX and business metrics such as conversion rate, click-through rates, abandonment, bounces, and so on and so on. Okay, and so, well, you should know that in general, in the let's say business and product world, and I'm not saying this in a negative way because, to be honest, I completely understand it. There are some metrics that are more important than others, and it's completely normal because they should be used at the end of the funnel in the product development process, at the end of the cycle. So the usual cycle should be discovery research or foundational research, then discovery research, then evaluation research, and then A/B test. And that is why, in general, when we are in A/B test, we have a final version. And maybe if we want to make one tiny tweak, that we don't assume changes that much in the user experience, but maybe it will change a lot in terms of conversions and click-through rates and so on. So that's the point. In this case, if you see that this changes a lot in conversion, let's say the population B buys a product 1,000 times more than in the variation A. Well, okay, of course you will choose variation B because it leads to more revenue. Okay, you will prioritize this because at the level of business it makes sense. But this is one kind of information. This is actually analytics. This is A/B tests. This is behavioral information that is used at the end of the funnel to confirm just before launch or just after launch in this case because it's A/B test, the impact of a factor. This is not the same as running a qualitative research to understand users' needs. In general, you shouldn't collate these two research methodologies really close in the timeline. Because if you uncover some insights with the first one being the qualitative research, and you cannot act on it, and then you find something that is conflicting with, not conflicting, but telling another story, and the story you like most because it's linked to higher revenue, understandable, okay, go for it, but then the qualitative insights will not be applied. So I hope that with this kind of story, or at least example, you can understand the danger of answering any research request, because this is an actual real life story. I have been solicited to run research just before A/B test, and I uncover some qualitative insights, and they have not been applied because in A/B test, well, the variant was actually leading to more revenue. This happens a lot, but this is not due to the lack of effectiveness of your UX research. This is due just to the fact of running this kind of research too close to a completely different set of questions and hypotheses and objectives. So that's the point. Be careful of the research requests that don't match the actual step in the product development that they should be used for, and the methodologies that they should be used for. So, as I was saying, of course you have a say in the methodology you will use, but it depends to some extent on the questions that the stakeholders will ask you. If the stakeholders come to you and ask, I want to know the needs of my users, I want to know the expectations, well, you don't have much of a choice. You will use exploratory research methods. You will not use a survey if you want to understand a need or uncover some expectations. You will have to use discovery research methodologies. And so this conflicts with end of the funnel methodologies such as A/B tests. And so that's why over the years and over experience, I refined this framework to include this very important set of questions, such as what stage are we in the product development process? And if we conduct research and create a list of recommendations, can you actually make them a reality? And how are we going to use the research insights? Because if they are not used, there is absolutely no need to run research. And it doesn't mean that you're not useful. It just means you should place your efforts onto something else. Because you likely have tens of other projects waiting. So there is absolutely no need. Okay, and so if the research project in itself fails to answer positively to these questions, you discard it and you do not move forward with this. And if you have to, at least you can warn your stakeholders on these topics. Then the second filter, let's say, is to question again, what is the depth of the research that should be conducted? Again, for the same set of reasons. The first, the set of reasons being that the time is still of the essence and that you need to prioritize. And so this prioritization is done in a different way. It's not a prioritization, it's prioritization of efforts. So if you have two projects waiting and you have one project in which you know nothing, previous knowledge about this, you have nothing, and you know that there is a huge risk of launching the feature without research, versus another project in which you know a lot of things and there is not so much risk to launch the product without research. Actually, you could place them in a matrix and you could already imagine that they would be quite opposed in the matrix. So the first one, in which you don't have a lot of knowledge about the project and there is a high risk, you will need to run heavy research on this. You will need to be quite informed before moving forward. And the second one, in which you already know quite some things and there is not so much risk, you can run some lightweight research or maybe move directly forward with A/B tests. And so this set of questions that I will introduce now will help you to determine to what extent you should use more or less the extent to which you should use your efforts to tackle this research project, okay? So first of all, the questions related to the problem statement. What is the user problem we are actually tackling? So all of the questions related to the user problem And I think I already covered it in a past episode. So this is actually a framework, which is the 5WH1. 5W for what, where, when, why, and when. And the H1 is actually the how. So what is the user problem? What evidence do you have about this user problem? This is complementary. So here you should ask your stakeholder about any evidence, any. In general, analytics are better in this case because it will give you some confidence, but any evidence is welcome here. When is the problem happening? In terms of timeline, where is the problem happening? So it can be on a section of a website, it can be somewhere near the house of your user, whatever, where, the location. Why is this problem happening? How is the customer currently behaving to solve that problem or to tackle it? And then other sets of questions related to the problem. Are we solving the right problem? And are we solving a problem for the right audience? So this acts as well as a filter, because if you realize by asking these questions that you're not solving the right problem, well, there might be another project waiting for you in which you would have the right problem to solve. So think about this. Okay, and then the next set of questions will help you to determine what is the amount of knowledge you already have on this project before moving forward. You remember, in order for you to determine how heavy your research should be, you should have two parameters in mind, which are the level of knowledge and the amount of risk of launching a product or a feature without actually running research. So let's go first with the amount of knowledge. So you have the what do we know, what information do we have on this topic. So you can ask for past research reports, any documentation whatsoever, and what can we understand about user behavior or unmet needs from data. So this is more like of a synthesis from your past information, but so it can come from you, this synthesis, and not necessarily from your stakeholders. Then we have the what we think we know, what assumptions do we already have, and of course what research is the basis of these assumptions. This is super important because a lot of the time, pretty frequently, your stakeholders will share with you some assumptions. And if you don't back up these assumptions by data, a lot of the times what happens is progressively these assumptions move on to the category of facts, because they are so they are so much repeated that people start to internalize them and accept them as the truth. And this is very dangerous. That's why you should make sure that every assumption people have are backed up by data. Because if not, we move on to the third category, which is what we do not know. So what do we do not know? From what we don't know, what do we want to know? So this is kind of a filter as well. So these are all your research questions. What do you want to know? And then, what don't you know? And from that, what do you want to know? And the second question will help you filter your first question. And then let's move on to the risks. Okay, what is the risk of not doing research? Maybe I want to launch a new section of my website. It's a whole new section. Well, maybe if I want to make sure I'm answering people's needs, and I will actually have success launching it, because behind that there is a lot of efforts in terms of engineering, in terms of development, in terms of design. Maybe I want to get this right. If this is like a 6 months project for everyone, maybe I want to get this right. So this is then there are some frameworks to measure the risk, but this is an overall question. You don't have to come up with a big framework, just an overall idea of the risk of launching the feature without research. And then we move on to some constraints, concerns, and business aspects. So first, about constraints. What are the timeline constraints? So this will directly impact on how heavy your research would be. If your stakeholder tells you, I want this research in 1 month, you will, of course, not run the same research than the one you could run in 3 months. It's not the same. And also, what are the tech requirements, constraints? This is important. So this is super important because I know, and I have been told many, many times, and I also agree with people saying that we are research. We don't care about the tech constraints. The tech constraints, it should be from designers onwards thinking about this. I kind of agree, because we should deliver insights and that's it. Okay, but the goal of delivering insights, the purpose of UX researcher is to inform product decisions and strategy so that we are actually creating an impact on the life of a customer and on the business. So, to any stakeholder listening to this, for instance, a product manager, even some UX research managers have told me this in the past. Keep in mind that if you run research, it's to deliver insights that will have to inform product development. If we know onwards that product development cannot be changed at this or that part of the product, if we know that we cannot, that we are very, very limited in what we can implement, what is the use of going broad research to gather as insights as broadly as possible, if we know that we can implement only 5% of that? I mean, there is absolutely no use in that. So let's take one extreme. The extreme is I have a website and I want to know how I should redesign it. Okay. But so this is an extreme, okay? But it's just for the sake of the argument. And so I hire a UX researcher to run research with my customers of the website. Let's say it's a marketplace for coffee beans. And I know, because of tech requirements, I am using a current framework. I don't know, maybe I don't know, it's WordPress, whatever. I know that I cannot change a thing. This is extreme, I know, but imagine I cannot change a thing. Why should I run research if I know that I will not act on my insights? It's not for the same reason as the one in the first section, because the one in the first section is about timeline and priorities and how the stakeholders prioritize research. But in this case, it's more like technical constraints. If I know I cannot change, there is no need to run research. So that's my point, because then you have a lot of other research waiting, in which when you deliver insights, you will actually drive impact. Moving on to concerns. What are potential concerns or obstacles? And regarding business, how does this research relate to the company and strategy? What are business objectives and what are the business key results? This is extremely important, because you want to prioritize research that actually has an impact on the business strategy. Okay, and now to end with the last section, which is actually a section that is not a filter, but is here more to help you to craft your research plan. So it's a set of questions to help you determine how to conduct your UX research itself, and also align expectations with your stakeholders. So you have a first category, which is about stakeholders' expectations. What data do stakeholders need to move on with the next step? What do they expect from this research? What should we tackle in priority? What are the stakeholders' communications and involvement preferences? What are the hard deliverables? Should it be a presentation? Should it be a report? What are the soft deliverables? Should it be a customer journey, a persona, empathy map, condensed insights? What are some participants' characteristics, behavioral characteristics we should focus on? So here it's about the screening, about participants. So behavioral characteristics is like, I don't know, the really active customers, the one logging on our website more than once a week, whatever. This is a behavioral characteristic. And then you can ask also demographic characteristics, such as, I don't know, where they live, what is the configuration of their family, of their household, and so on. What are the main competitors, so that you can have an idea of the questions you might ask your participants. Actually, this is very useful. The competitors are not only useful when it comes to design, to get inspiration. It's also for you to get inspiration regarding what questions you can ask your users in order to relate that to the competition. Then in terms of success metrics, what does success look like? Is it that, for instance, the users accomplish their task? Is it that the users are satisfied? Is it more user engagement, adoption, retention, task successes, and so on and so forth? And before moving forward, again, this is to scope, so then you can have more questions when it comes to your research plan, such as regarding the audience. Who are the users? What are their goals? This is very important. What are their end goals? The task they actually perform, why do they do it? What are the use cases? And this is related to the prototype you might need to test. If you know the use cases, you will know what tasks you should ask your users when they use the prototype. What is the relative importance of each use case? And this is also a set of questions that is linked related to the product. What is the flow of the prototype for each use case? What is the current flow? By current flow, I mean the one that is live, so that you can actually formulate hypotheses regarding the expected outcome of the redesign, and hypotheses related to the answers your users might provide to your questions. What is the soon to be implemented flow? This is the same thing as a prototype. And why? The why is, do we have any justification for the flow being the way it is? So that you can actually craft hypotheses. And I'm actually really, really surprised, astonished when I run UX research. And I do not say it negatively, because I know that sometimes, and more often than not actually, this is not on us. This is due to the architecture of the company you work in, or the situation, or the circumstances. But I'm actually very astonished when I ask various kinds of stakeholders, such as product managers, designers, why is this the way it is? This is actually very, very simple. So, of course, don't ask this to a designer who just arrived at the company 1 week ago, and even maybe up to a year. Sometimes they won't know. But if you have a product manager who is in charge of a product for, I don't know, the past 2 years, for instance, and you ask, I don't know, why is this flow this way? Compared, if this is the first version, be it. It has been developed this way, and that's it, okay. But still, they should have a reason. And you ask, why is this redesigned? It has been redesigned 1 month ago, for instance. You changed this to that. Can you explain me why? And in my opinion, this is kind of a red flag if the person is not able to tell you. And this is not personal. I do not mean the person itself, him or herself. I mean, not being able to have a reason behind a redesign change is actually surprising. And also not helpful, because if you need then to evaluate, to be able to evaluate something, you should know what you're looking for. And to know what you're looking for, you should know the rationale behind the design that has been done. So I'm just saying that to warn you, UX researchers listening to me, regarding the importance of this kind of questions. What are the user's flows? What is the reason behind the design of every flow? And that's it for today's episode. Thank you everyone for joining me today on UX Change. I hope you found today's episode insightful and valuable. Make sure to subscribe in order for you not to miss the next episode. Share it if you liked it, and leave a review. Thank you for your time and attention. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future topics, feel free to reach out directly to me. You can find all the details in the show notes. And see you in the next episode. Bye-bye. Yo.